Jenny's phone buzzed without warning. A family WhatsApp group, silent for months, suddenly lit up with a blurry video. She tapped it, expecting a random meme, maybe a forwarded prayer chain. What she saw instead stopped her cold. Sumit, the man she had spent nearly a decade loving, was sliding a ring onto another woman's hand. He was smiling beneath a floral arch she had imagined in her dreams more times than she could count. The crowd clapped, garlands were exchanged, and even the father who had refused to attend her wedding was there, smiling. Someone behind the camera laughed, saying, "She's in America now." He's finally free. Jenny didn't scream. She didn't throw her phone. She just froze. How do you process a decade of love erased in 42 seconds? And the worst part? This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. Wait until you see why this wasn't just cheating. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Jenny didn't move to India on a whim. She left behind her home, her job, her routines, trading them all for a promise that felt right, a future she believed in. Every day in India was a lesson in patience. She learned customs, walked barefoot into temples, smiled politely when the family's disapproval lingered in the room, and navigated subtle digs that could have broken anyone else. She posted filtered sunsets on Instagram, captioned them vaguely, and kept her heart open while Sumit's family watched silently, calculating. She believed in love, but also in hope. Every small act of kindness from Sumit felt like a signal that she was close to being fully accepted. He told her things would work out, that patience was the key, and she held on, sometimes shrinking herself just to fit their rhythm. Every conversation, every family dinner, every festival became a quiet test of her loyalty. She wasn't just waiting for him, she was performing devotion in front of cameras and relatives alike. Sumit wasn't reckless. His emotions were measured, calibrated. When his mother raised her voice, he reassured Jenny it wasn't as bad as it seemed. When objections arose, he offered apologies and compromise, enough to keep her hoping but never enough to close the gap fully. Every delay, every soft excuse, became part of a pattern she didn't see clearly at the time. Loyalty stretched to its limits, manipulated into service of someone else's schedule. And all the while, the family moved quietly in the background. Invitations were drafted, schedules were made. Every step was being coordinated without Jenny knowing it. The realization starts to creep in. This wasn't just hesitation or cultural rigidity, it was strategic. Keep watching, because the real shock is how perfectly the whole plan fell into place. Jenny clicked play. 42 seconds. That was all it took to rewrite her entire life. The video was grainy, shaky, almost casual. But every detail screamed precision. Sumit stood beneath a floral arch, gold-embroidered sherwani gleaming, sliding a ring onto another woman's hand. The crowd clapped. Garlands were placed with deliberate care. Even the father who had refused to attend Jenny's wedding was smiling, handing out sweets, fully present. And behind the lens, someone chuckled. She's in America now. He's finally free. Jenny didn't scream. She didn't throw her phone. She didn't even cry. Her eyes stayed dry, but her entire body froze, trying to confirm that the ground still existed beneath her feet. What's remarkable isn't the act itself, it's the silence around it. No fiery argument. No dramatic confrontation. Just 42 seconds that erased a decade of love and struggle, patience, hope, and loyalty. Everything Jenny had poured into this relationship was compressed into a few moments of orchestrated joy for someone else. You see, patience isn't always noble. In Jenny's case, it became a trap. Each will figure it out, and give it time from Sumit fed her belief that the story could still turn in her favor. She endured family tension, cultural barriers, and delayed acceptance, thinking every step forward brought her closer to inclusion. But the delays weren't accidental. They were calculated pauses, strategically placed so her hope became the mechanism keeping the story alive for everyone but her. The Instagram accounts told another part of the story. Jenny's name vanished from posts, captions she once helped craft erased, memories scrubbed with surgical efficiency. Not a word, not a nod, not even a vague acknowledgement. And yet, The engagement was celebrated like a festival, smiles perfectly aligned, cameras capturing joy without hesitation. Where Jenny had labored to be seen, Sumit now moved effortlessly, surrounded by a family fully prepared to welcome him. It hits harder when you contrast her struggles with his smooth rhythm. Every step she had taken, every compromise she made, every moment of endurance, gone, invisible, unnecessary for the path he had quietly set. And that's the psychological blow of delayed betrayal. The longer you invest hope, the more it feels like loyalty. Until you realize it was never about inclusion, it was about timing. And then the question hits. Who else knew? When did planning begin? Because genuine love doesn't turn into public celebration in 5 weeks without coordination. Invitations, venues, outfits, camera crews, it all had to be scheduled in advance, carefully orchestrated so that Jenny's departure would trigger the next phase without a hitch. Every replay of that short video forced her to measure the timeline. She returned to the States 5 weeks prior, leaving quietly, believing space might clarify everything. Yet, within that brief window, everything had been set in motion. This was not impulsive. It was methodical, precise, and deeply strategic. Her patience, which had once felt like a virtue, had been stretched to serve the rhythm of everyone else's comfort. Sumit's calmness is striking. No hesitation, no awkward moments, no missteps. Every gesture was measured. Every smile appeared natural. But behind it was careful rehearsal. Contrast that with Jenny's prior experiences, forced smiles at reluctant family gatherings, careful negotiations, emotional buffering, and hope stretched thin across years. Now the story had flipped. The system that had delayed, manipulated, and tested her now rewarded him without effort. You won't believe how quickly the story shifted the moment Jenny left. Sumit's family didn't just witness the events, they controlled the timeline. Every gesture, every smile, every ceremonial detail had their fingerprints on it. From subtle nods during dinner conversations to approving locations for pre-wedding rituals, they orchestrated the environment so that Jenny's absence wouldn't leave a gap. Invitations were drafted quietly. Garlands were picked out in secret. Even the small social media announcements were carefully timed, erasing traces of Jenny while subtly signaling to friends and relatives that the story had moved forward. Every step, from the initial planning to the final click of a camera, was designed for maximum effect with zero resistance. Jenny's loyalty had been her currency. Years of negotiating family expectations, enduring cultural friction, and performing devotion publicly had built a foundation of trust. But the family never intended to honor it. Sumit moved freely, gliding into his new role with ease, while Jenny's past efforts were invisible, wiped away with surgical precision. It's a stark reminder that loyalty, when unreciprocated and exploited, becomes a tool for someone else's gain rather than a bridge to connection. The psychological impact of this kind of manipulation is subtle but devastating. It's not the shouting or confrontation that breaks someone. It's the quiet erasure, the way omission and silence slowly erode reality. Seeing family members smile approvingly at the wedding while every effort you made is erased creates a dissonance that hurts more than any open argument. It's the knowledge that time, patience, and hope were being used as instruments against you, without a single word to announce it. And then there's Sumit himself. Calm, measured, composed. Every gesture, every nod, every smile at the engagement felt effortless. There was no visible anxiety, no awkward moments to give away the underlying tension. In contrast, Jenny had spent years bending, adjusting, compromising, hoping for inclusion. And now the audience watching her video sees the flip, effort erased, calmness rewarded. Would you have seen this coming? Could you stay this long if you were her? Social media became another arena for control. Jenny's posts disappeared. Her tags were gone. Photos she thought marked shared milestones vanished from family albums. Sumit's presence expanded instead. Carefully staged images, engagement selfies, and public announcements projected a life seamlessly moving forward. Every erased caption, every muted memory, was another layer of the quiet betrayal. Even the rituals, the ceremonies, followed a rhythm designed to highlight celebration while erasing the prior narrative. Flowers, music, vows, and blessings were all choreographed to maximize visibility and emotional impact. Nothing was spontaneous. Everything was intentional. Jenny's absence wasn't just noted, it was exploited, made invisible in a way that emphasized her lack of control. As the story unfolds, the audience begins to notice subtle cracks in perception. Jenny, who once believed in hope and patience, starts to realize the full extent of the erasure. It's a painful awakening. This isn't just about a breakup or a lapse in judgment. It's about a system designed to replace her silently, efficiently, and publicly. And in the midst of all this, the tension keeps building. Sumit's calmness, the family's perfect timing, the social media cleanup, and the rituals all point to a single, unsettling fact: Jenny's presence had been rendered irrelevant without a word. The betrayal is not flashy. It's surgical, quiet, and systemic. The real twist? What happens when silence is the weapon, not words? Jenny didn't take to social media immediately. When she finally posted a short message, it wasn't fiery or accusatory. There were no capital letters, no exclamation points, no hashtags screaming betrayal. It was quiet, restrained, and strangely dignified. A few simple words acknowledged the end without dramatizing it. A nod to herself that her story didn't need anyone else to validate her pain. She didn't need to erase her past to move forward. That calm, careful acknowledgement contrasted sharply with the orchestrated spectacle she had just witnessed. Sumit and his new bride continued their public celebrations, flawless and effortless, while Jenny quietly reclaimed her agency. One moved with the rhythm of a system, the other stepped out of it entirely. There's a clarity and closure that chaos can never provide. Jenny's restraint wasn't weakness, it was survival. Years of hope, patience, and emotional labor could have been weaponized against her indefinitely, but by choosing silence and measured acknowledgement, she reclaimed control over her narrative. She demonstrated that the power isn't in endurance, but in knowing when to step away. It's a lesson that hits deep because so many viewers have been there. We've all waited for someone to keep promises they never intended to honor. We've all tolerated delays that felt like compromise, but were really a slow test of loyalty. Jenny's story mirrors that quiet ache many of us have felt, the longing for reciprocity, and the moment we finally realize it may never come. Her timeline became a mirror for fans dissecting every moment, every post, every missed call. Social media theories exploded in comment threads. Was this really the first time the wedding was planned? Could Sumit have acted differently? How had Jenny's patience been manipulated for so long? Each scrutiny added to the tension of the story, keeping her audience engaged long after she logged off. And through it all, there was empathy. Viewers understood her quiet heartbreak because they had lived it themselves, in smaller but no less painful doses. Contrast that with the efficiency of the system she was leaving behind. Sumit didn't stumble. He didn't hesitate. Every smile, every photograph, every ritual had been timed and rehearsed. It was a stark lesson in patience versus strategy. Waiting can feel virtuous, but in some scenarios, hope becomes a liability. It doesn't reward loyalty. It only prolongs exposure to someone else's carefully controlled narrative. Jenny's dignity also invites reflection. Watching her move forward quietly forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Have you ever stayed too long? Have you invested energy in someone else's timeline at the expense of your own life? Could you have stepped away sooner? Or was patience always the lens through which you measured your worth? Her story is relatable because it mirrors everyday dynamics in love, family, and even career decisions. We recognize ourselves in her restraint. Our own quiet disappointments echoed in her silent acknowledgement. Even in this final acknowledgement, subtle tension lingers. Fans continue to trace the timeline, debating when the plan truly began, questioning who else might have been complicit. Each post, Each comment, each replay adds new layers of understanding. It's a reminder that closure isn't a single moment. It's a process of interpretation, reflection, and finally, choosing to prioritize your own agency over external validation. This part will change how you watch every 90-day couple from now on. Almost immediately after the wedding video went public, the fans went into overdrive. Social media threads exploded with theories, timelines, and screenshots. Every post Jenny had ever made was scoured. People compared dates, cross-referenced flight records, and pieced together who had known what and when. Some fans noticed subtle changes in Sumit's family accounts, photos deleted, captions edited, comments muted. Others tracked locations, noticing how quickly every detail of the new ceremony had been locked in while Jenny was still overseas. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a full-scale narrative takeover, carefully executed, with a public audience none the wiser. Fans expected chaos, arguments, and on-camera confrontations. They wanted dramatic shouting matches, tears, and explosive revelations. Reality TV thrives on those moments. But this story broke the mold. Here, the drama wasn't loud. It was slow, deliberate, and invisible to most viewers at first glance. The tension came from absence, from what wasn't happening, from the silent erasure of someone who had invested years of emotional labor. The audience suddenly realized the show doesn't always reward confrontation. It rewards timing, calculated pauses, and the careful orchestration of appearances. And then came the comparisons. Longtime viewers noticed a pattern repeated across the franchise: patience tested, loyalty stretched, and eventual replacement or system-approved resolution. Jenny's story wasn't unique. It was a magnified example of a formula the show has used many times before. Fans dissected it, sharing charts, timelines, and side-by-side screenshots of past couples. The thrill wasn't in the betrayal alone. It was in the realization that the system exploits one-sided devotion for maximum dramatic effect. Loyalty becomes content, and emotional labor becomes fuel. This revelation sparked debate. Could viewers sympathize with Jenny without criticizing her for staying too long? Could they reconcile their own frustrations with the system while remaining invested in the characters? The story highlighted the paradox of reality TV. Audiences crave authenticity, but are drawn to calculated manipulation. Suspense is maintained not by closure, but by hesitation, by slow-moving conflict, by the tension of waiting for the next reveal. Even as fans expressed anger and disbelief, Sumit and his family continued to operate efficiently. There were no errors, no slips, no unexpected hiccups. Every announcement, every photo, every ceremonial moment reinforced the system's control. It was a masterclass in how a reality show manipulates narrative while keeping the performers, and even the audience, on edge. The contrast between audience fury and system calm was jarring. Fans were furious, but the system kept moving without blinking. Hints of the next storylines already began to surface. Analysts pointed out connections to other couples, potential follow-up episodes, and patterns suggesting future drama. Every fan theory became a thread to pull, every post a breadcrumb leading to the next reveal. This wasn't just one story ending. It was the setup for the next wave of intrigue, teasing what might happen when patience meets strategy again. The lesson here is clear. Reality TV rewards orchestration over impulsiveness, timing over emotional investment. Jenny's story and the fan reaction it generated serves as a reminder that watching the show is as much about decoding the system as it is about following the couples. And the anticipation? It's already building for the next revelation, for the next episode that promises to twist expectations once more. In the end, Jenny's power wasn't in confrontation. It wasn't in posting angry messages or trying to reclaim her erased timeline. Her empowerment came quietly, in choosing herself over the system that had used her patience as a tool. She stepped back, acknowledged the end, and reclaimed her narrative on her own terms. One-sided loyalty had been her reality for years, but she didn't allow it to define her future. In that quiet dignity, there was a lesson for everyone watching. Sometimes the strongest move isn't to fight harder, but to step out of the game entirely. Betrayal isn't always loud. It doesn't always happen in a storm of words or actions. Sometimes it is measured, silent, and deliberate. The erasure, the omissions, the careful timing, all of it screams louder than a confrontation ever could. Jenny's story proves that silence can hurt more than shouting. It's subtle, methodical, and when you finally notice it, the emotional weight hits harder than any public argument could. Watching her reclaim agency quietly forces the audience to rethink how they define loyalty, patience, and strength. This isn't just about Jenny and Sumit. The patterns echo across the franchise. Couples who linger in hope, who defer their own needs, often find themselves navigating similar orchestrated dramas. And fans, always vigilant, pick up on these patterns, analyzing, debating, and theorizing. Every new storyline in the franchise carries the shadow of the last, teaching lessons about timing, control, and how emotional labor is often exploited for narrative tension. For viewers, the takeaway is clear: investing in someone else's timeline can be costly. Recognizing manipulation, seeing when patience has become a trap, and stepping away without drama can be the most empowering act of all. Jenny's quiet closure is a blueprint for self-respect in a world that rewards performative loyalty and punishes hesitation. And the next twist? You won't see it coming until someone finally stops waiting.